Let's call this regularly scheduled commission meeting of the City of St. Pete Beach to order. Today is Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. It is 6 p.m. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, you had something you wanted to share with us?
Yes, let me do the roll call and then I'll be happy to
Perfect.
stand. Vice Mayor Lorenzen.
Yes.
Commissioner Marriott.
Here.
Commissioner Filtz.
Here.
Commissioner Reznicki.
Here.
Mayor Petrilla.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. It was recently brought to my attention that I have a colleague that has continued to provide 10 years of dedicated service to the city. Even through everything that he's been through, he deserves this recognition wholeheartedly. And the City Commission and I would like to present you with this to recognize your service.
Yes, and if I could, Mayor, just for a minute. So yeah, Andrew, it's been a very fun 10 years for you. I've been here for 8 years. I just really appreciate you bringing me along for the ride to this beautiful city. And I'm probably one of the only people besides my brother that can say I was, raised by a man. You're a parent, and I truly appreciate what you've done for me. You're a mentor, and now you're my law partner. So thank you for everything.
Thank you, everybody. I don't have a lot to say, but I want to, my wife Odie is here, and my daughter-in-law Tamara is here, so I'm really happy about that. Thank you all. What a surprise. I don't like getting caught off guard. All right.
Well, it's important, Odie Dickman, it's important for me to say that we really, as a family and as a firm, want to thank the Commission, the City of St. Pete Beach, and more importantly, the public. The amount of support that we received during a very difficult time was just unbelievable. So the cards, the texts, the messages, even just the support of having faith that we could still do a good job and give you the service that you deserve. So we really do appreciate everyone for that. Thank you.
Pardon my back, I'm sorry. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. I really do. I've served under a lot of great people. I'm still serving under a lot of great people. It's a learning process every day for me to be here. I especially enjoy meeting all of the employees that you all have, the people that take care of your streets, that clean your parks, that are your custodians. All of them have been so good to me and nice to me, the folks in planning everywhere. So from top to bottom, it's just been a joy to be here. I can't believe it's been 10 years. My God. I gotta look at the picture of me 10 years ago.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, boy.
All right, do we have any changes to the agenda as proposed, please?
I'd like to add a discussion item about the house on 73rd and Mangrove.
Okay.
And I wanted to add another discussion item in reference to processes for contracts, ordinances, CUPs, motions that have been drawn. I don't know what to call it, but just discussion.
Okay.
Mayor, City Commission, I'd like to respectfully request to remove consent item B, C, E, and action item 5A. I want to apologize. Staff and the city manager are getting used to working with each other and changing a bit of process, so I want to work a little bit more with staff on the item and bring it back to you at a later meeting.
Okay, to confirm, that is removing 4B, 4C, 4E, and 5A. Thank you. Any other changes? I would like to pull item 4D to an action item. Great. Any other changes? May I please have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
I will make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Second.
Thank you. City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Reznicki?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, City Clerk. Do we have any audience comments?
Randy Shestine?
If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Randy Shastine, 6340 3rd Palm Point. I'd just like to compliment my District 2 Commissioner for a positive campaign, a very honest, positive campaign. But I have a couple...
Sorry, sir, but we are non-political in this session, so you will limit your comments to anything that doesn't have to do with the election. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Will Lawson?
If you'll please silence your cell phones. Thank you. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Will Lawson. I live on Leilani Drive. I spoke to you all, besides Commissioner Reznicki, back in December when you were freshly appointed city commissioners. To refresh everyone's memory, I was concerned because the term appointed city commissioner is inherently an oxymoron. The city was in a period of chaos and angst because of unprecedented resignations and the upcoming decisions regarding conditional use permits and redevelopment plans. And the underlying theme of these discussions were centered around the question of what endangers this city. And as a frustrated observer, I argued the point that the most dangerous threat to this city is you. And to risk repeating myself, you were placed in a position of power that allows you to affect the daily lives of this community, and virtually every resident had zero input on your ascent to this power. Now, it was greatly concerning to me that the city commissioners, a position that is rooted in representation, was now an appointed position. But I knew those concerns would be mitigated if you all had the wisdom and foresight to recognize that although you are not bound to the will of the people through election, you are bound in principle to be a public servant. Well, it has been 8 months since then, and I wish I could report back that my concerns have subsided, and as a resident, I feel heard and advocated for by my city commission. But unfortunately, that is not the case. As I reflect on all that has happened since December, I stand before you confused. As a young adult who is learning about what it means to be a contributing member of society, I am left wondering who the City Commission is for. It's painfully obvious that the City Commission is supposed to be for its residents. I know this in principle because people, through our social and political natures, form these communities and aim towards mutual benefit. And I also know this practically because the residents carry 80% of the city's tax burden. And therefore, my confusion arrives when it is also painfully obvious that the City Commission does not serve its residents. I mean, both public comments to you during each CUP and public record requests of your communications clearly show the supermajority was not in favor of these expansions. As I look ahead for a remedy for my confusion and frustration, I'm glad that this era of appointed commissioners is coming to an end. And I'm grateful to see the importance of fulfilling my civic duty and voting at such a young age with a long upcoming overdue election. We live in a fallen world, and one symptom of that fall is the corruptive nature of power. And I hope that the current and future City Commission will recognize the responsibility they have as representatives for the city of St. Pete Beach, so this place that I've grown to love and care for will not fade to mediocrity. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments?
Lisa Robinson.
If you please state your name and address for the record.
Lisa Robinson, 7100 Bocasega Drive. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our new city manager for meeting with me to discuss the status and movement forward of the small business site improvement grant, and then also discuss the need to prioritize residents' needs and negotiate on every level for the benefit of the residents. As the residents, as the largest stakeholder in this city, must come first and foremost. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Grill.
If you please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, all. Mark Grill, Second Palm Point, St. Pete Beach. I hope everyone fared well during the recent storms. I'm here tonight as a follow-up to the last commission meeting. I'm here to express my utmost disappointment at the city's actions after that meeting. As you remember, I stood here at this podium and presented facts about, among other things, the city's budget, one of the current lawsuits against the city, and I made a request for unity. It would seem, though, that I have views that differ with the city, and I know that many residents also have differing views on various topics, and I think that's okay. In our form of government, we're meant to discuss, debate, compromise, and find the best solution to go forward. But what happened in the days after the last meeting was disappointing, to say the least. Usually, speakers are thanked for their comments. At times, feedback is provided. For example, thank you for your comments. Well, think about that. Thank you for your comments. We disagree. Instead, in the days following, I was personally attacked. Following the meeting, a city official went home and made a video that twisted facts, personally attacked me, and blamed me for the issues being faced by the city. The official used their formal city title to introduce the video. They shared the video on various social media platforms, YouTube, Nextdoor, Facebook. The official's profile on each of these platforms states their official city title. In addition, the link to the video was shared in a newsletter by the self-proclaimed St. Pete Beach Residents Advocacy Group. In the past, they've stated that they have over 2,000 members. As far as I know, that is an unprecedented action by the city of St. Pete Beach. It's frightening to see this happen in our city. As I've said before, the nasty political mudslinging that goes on a national level should not be brought into our city. It will not help our city. In the video, there was a call for unity. That's the only good thing I saw in that video. But unity does not mean we all agree with each other all the time. Unity is not groupthink. Unity does not mean you are with me or you are against me. And yes, the city manager sent me an email to say the video was not an official city video. But when a city official uses their title to introduce themselves, then speak about official city business, what other conclusion can the viewer reach besides this coming from the city government? As I said above, we need to work together to move the city forward. As part of that, there should be positive discussion on different points of view. That's a healthy approach. Or is the official approach now to have our city, through its officials, personally attack residents and shut down any differing points of view? I certainly hope not. How can that approach be a representative government? Thank you.
We thank you for your comments. Any others?
Deb Scheckner.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Deborah Scheckner, Bocasega Isle Drive in St. Pete Beach. I think we need to take a look at what happened after Storm Debbie. It demonstrated that this was only a storm, and the damage and the flooding was severe, not only in my neighborhood, but I will say some neighborhood even worse. We had massive dumping of sewage. Some of it ours in the city of St. Pete Beach, the city of St. Pete, that's where we send it. Several other cities had the same thing. When I say massive, I do mean massive. I think I already said we're under phase 1 drought. So what happens when you allow all of these hotels And all of this building, and probably 5 or 6 more hotels who now want to come before you and start the process, and one already has, who's going to get the water? The residents? With hotels? Who's going to handle the cost of the massive dumping of not only floodwater, but sewer? One of our mayors who ran for office several years ago, her slogan was, "No more poop on the street." That's serious. We're not talking about treated water, which I don't really believe how much it's treated. We're talking about poop on the streets. We cannot even handle what we have now, yet you're going to build hundreds and hundreds of hotel rooms. I say that we need to look at our, I keep hearing him speaking, need to look not only at our process, but we need to seriously consider who gets the water, who gets to flush their toilet, who doesn't get flooded. Because right now, all the money that we have spent as residents has gone to the large resort district. And a whole sewer area was built just for them at our cost. So it tells me you're not that concerned about the residents. If the large hotel district gets all the money, put in the sewer system just for them. I think we also need to look at where you stand. Been here speaking for 20-something years. The message has never changed. The residents have not changed. Interestingly, the residents who come here as new residents feel the same way. And one said to me, "I would never think I'd have to go to City Hall to find out what's going to happen in the city when I move there." It just didn't faze them that that would be part of the real estate project of searching for a house. So I'm very disappointed that the residents always get the back seat. This city is made of residents. We pay most of the taxes. We are united, and I have said this many, many times. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Conskell.
If you please state your name and address for the record.
Susan Consul, 3rd Palm Point. Mr. Mayor, 2 weeks ago, you posted a YouTube video
Ma'am,
entitled...
I apologize, but...
I'm talking about the YouTube video, how we got to this point regarding the lawsuit against our city. I am not talking about the campaign nor the election. I'm talking about the lawsuit. And if I may, I should be allowed, as a citizen,
My only
to
point was
address the
simply
lawsuit.
that if you want to speak on behalf of any one of us or address us all collectively, great, but not individually. So please continue as long as you limit your comments to that. Thank you.
In the video, it was alleged that the previous vice mayor abandoned his oath of office and his duty to the residents rather than file an overly intrusive Form 6 public financial disclosure. The 4 resigned commissioners broke no law, nor abandoned their oath or their residence, as it was stated in the video. The circuit court judge found the seating of the 4 current commissioners lawful, yet it was stated that the PSPB and the other named parties, including Lisa Robinson, who's running for District 2 Commissioner, felt they had no choice. The individual executed her choice by interviewing and running for the position. Despite the judge's ruling that there was no genuine issue for trial, they filed a motion for rehearing, which adds a significant financial burden to the city, with legal fees currently at $170,000 and climbing. In the second video that was posted and an endorsement on Nextdoor, an endorsement was made that stated the District 2 nominee the District 2 candidate running against the current
I will
candidate.
say the same thing I said to the previous gentleman, which is if you want to attack any one individual candidate or endorse them, this is not the time or place for
The
that.
divisive and arguably defamatory statements against fellow commissioners made in YouTube videos was unprofessional. To date, 5 commissioners have been maligned publicly in YouTube videos. It is the responsibility of the commission to foster unity and represent the best interest of all residents. However, publicly maligning fellow commissioners and endorsing candidates to a named lawsuit against the city raises concern about the commitment of those that are seated in front of me on the dais. How will the residents, and how can the residents expect and deserve public professionalism from our representatives who are in charge to represent the entire city and not just those who share their views? And are they truly fulfilling the responsibility that they've been elected to do? Thank you.
Mayor, let me just clarify something. Florida statute 286.0114, public meetings, reasonable opportunity to be heard, attorney fees, et cetera. The public has a right to speak at these meetings. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to when you ask someone not to say something based on the content. I'm cautioning you to not curtail someone's right to speak here based on their content. If we do have, as a city, the right to maintain orderly conduct, proper decorum, I agree with you on that. I'm not sure we have adopted anything yet, but I would just caution the commission and you as the chair of this commission on curtailing someone's ability to speak at a public meeting on the content of what they're saying. Now, if they disrupt the meeting and their behavior is disruptive, that's a different story, but I'm just cautioning you.
So we've been at several meetings where you have personally interrupted speakers when they personally attacked somebody up here, right? And that's what happened in the second instance here. And then if you're telling me that it's okay for residents to come up and either endorse or talk negatively about a candidate, then by all means, I would invite the 2 speakers to come back and speak their mind.
I'm asking you, like, where do you have, I'm not sure where you're getting.
Well, based on your previous interactions and based on your previous
No, I think it's true. If you want to get to the rules of it, they should be addressing the commission as a whole through you. You know, it's been the practice of the commission to sometimes answer questions, sometimes not.
How many times have you seen former Commissioner Frislowski here when he was personally attacked, shutting them down? And you have not one single time interrupted him and said, no, Commissioner, let them speak. By all means, I was following precedent. Personally, I don't have any issues if the 2 speakers would like to come back with the consent of the rest of the commission, give them an additional minute to speak their mind. By all means, I don't have a problem with that. I was following prior precedent, and so if you're correcting me and saying that's not the way it should be, then by all means, I'm happy to follow the city attorney's instructions, and I'm happy to invite the speakers if they would like to come back and say their piece. I don't have a problem with that.
I say let's move on to city business. That's what we're here for.
But Mayor, may I say something? I agree 100%. I don't think anybody up here should be attacked, even though personally I have been also, and no one stopped it. But I am okay with someone coming back and speaking, because I caution legally limiting someone's right to speak, but caution whoever comes up not to attack anybody up here personally. You know, I'm kind of worried about someone leaving.
No, I 100% agree with you. I think we should give them the opportunity. If, again, I was following what my understanding of prior precedent was. If that's not the case, I'm happy to be corrected, and I'm happy for you to come back. So if you would like to come back, please do so. We will put another minute on the clock for each one of you.
Do you want me to restate my name?
Please restate your name and address for the record.
Third Palm Point. My point was that if publicly I can't say that what I felt on YouTube videos that Mayor Petrilla posted as the mayor of St. Pete Beach and put them out on a public platform, and one of which stated that Lisa Robinson had the commitment that the current commissioner, Nick Phillips, did not have. That was arguably defamatory when, without any evidence, from what I've seen, when going to all the meetings, I see participation, and if you wanted to endorse a candidate, it's fine to endorse a candidate. We all do. But not at the expense of someone else. And that's what I think is wrong.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I ask a question? Not to the speaker, but just for the commission. And I'm just kind of recalling, as being a resident sitting on the audience, listening to prior commission meetings, and this was probably sometime last year, maybe yourself or Amber might recall, or maybe our city attorney might remember, but wasn't there a discussion at one point about social media, and not just for commission posting, but a policy discussion on whether we should have policies on social media? I don't know if that's ringing a bell, but I know it's coming up in my head, if anybody remembers, that has been here before, and whether we should be bringing that back to the commission. Maybe this is a to-do thing or something that we could all discuss at a later time. Thank you.
The discussion particularly was, and the city clerk brought it to our attention at the time, that some of the various social media platforms have, because we do have to maintain public record, have some limitations in that. As far as if you want to talk about limiting speech of commissioners and mayors, now we're going to be infringing on the First Amendment, and that's going to be a real. That's going to be a.
I'm saying as an official position, and I'm not trying to bring anybody back up, but just I can't remember that day that well, so maybe you remember.
I mean, official positions are either declared here or they're declared through the city's official communication. But that certainly doesn't limit any commissioner or mayor, for that matter, whether you're having public meetings or you have your own public outreach channels to communicate to the residents directly. I don't think that's something that, if you look at not just our level, at the state level, at the federal level, all elected officials use their reach to communicate their messages to residents. And I think you all should take advantage of that and communicate to your residents directly so that they know, where you stand, because we have a limited amount of time here that we can speak on issues and clarify issues. Yeah. And I think it's perfectly appropriate to make sure that the, residents are well informed and accurately informed.
I also remember, I'm getting my flashbacks, but at and maybe Commissioner Marriott might remember, because I do recall a posting and the backlash that came from that. And at that point, you were an appointed commissioner, I believe. So
yes,
I can't agree with you 100%, because obviously someone was attacked on this dais for doing the same thing.
I would like to have a discussion about this, perhaps at a future meeting. Mm-hmm. I don't know that right now is the best time to do it, but my recollection is that I was very heavily criticized for posting on social media and basically told not to do it. And so I've been quite surprised when the mayor has felt very free to do that. I figured maybe it was just something he thought was a privilege that the mayor had and that nobody else did. So I would definitely appreciate a conversation about that in the future.
Yeah, we certainly should have a conversation about that. And before we get any further, I would like to invite the gentleman for the record to state whether or not he would like to take his additional minute to express his views. Okay, then please step forward. Please state your name and address for the record.
Randy Chastain, 3rd Palm Point. Thank the attorney for my First Amendment rights. What I've got here is a couple of flyers from the challenger to District 2. And it's got pictures of the current commissioner on there. And it basically implies he's a
Could you put it on the overhead so I can't see what.
He's not campaigning. He's not a candidate. He's just speaking.
As you can see, both flyers have pictures of the current occupant on there, implying all kinds of bad things that he did, like not finding our hard-earned $6 million, which I think disappeared well before his term, like rubber stamping approval for massive overdevelopment, like being a hand-selected puppet of greedy big developers, and most importantly, being a dark money candidate. And speaking of dark money, these all are funded by a Tampa PAC that I don't see any record of a contribution to a candidate in kind, according to Florida statutes. So my only question is for the city attorney to validate that the challengers' flyers are in compliance with Florida campaign statutes 106.07 and 106.055. Because in my reading, they are not in compliance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And in the interest of fairness, we should invite anyone else who spoke if they want to take an additional minute to speak. Any objections? Because we don't know what else they might have said that I asked them not to say.
Mayor, I only caution that the people coming up aren't rebutting people, because this is not.
I'm not going to be rebutting anybody.
This is something, an extension of what someone is speaking. I mean, we give 3 minutes, and now we're opening it up for anybody to come up to.
We used to also
start an
have
open
2 minutes at the
discussion.
end of the meeting to speak, and that was taken away. But my name is Deborah Schechner,
Excuse me, again, decorum, you know, I mean, we just talked about respecting the people up here, and now we're disrespecting. But can we have a conversation first, Ms. Schechner, before we go up? Because we're opening this up again. What are meeting rules? You know, I don't quite understand. We'll have opportunity to come up at any other item.
Mayor, if I could, let me just try to explain. I think you're doing the right thing, Mayor, because at the beginning of the meeting, you made a statement that we're not going to have any political stuff. So, in fact, Ms. Schechner, Mayor Schechner, could have wanted to say something that she didn't say. So I think you're doing the right thing by making sure that everyone had the opportunity to say what they wanted to say. I agree that folks shouldn't be here campaigning, but we have to be very careful not to control the content of speech, but the behavior and the decorum. That's what we can control. So, Mayor, I do think that in an abundance of caution, if you may have somehow shut somebody down by your comment at the beginning, and certainly I'll be happy to meet with you and talk to you about past precedent, and we can work all that out. But I think you're doing the right thing to just clean up the situation to allow everybody to have whatever they want to say.
No, absolutely, and I appreciate you saying that. I think we should hear from everyone, and I apologize if I, inadvertently, based on my past understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected and to make sure that I do not repeat the same mistake in the future. So, Mr. Schechner?
I wanted to, Deborah Schechner, Bocasega.
If I could just add, I apologize, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Schechner.
That's okay.
I would just ask that, this is all sticky ground we're walking, that we just don't allow either candidate for District 2 to speak at this time. Keep it to the public, if that seems fair.
Deborah Schechner, Bocasega Isle Drive in St. Pete Beach. It has been precedence for as long as I attended meetings for over 20 years that no one on the dais is ever named and personally attacked. It has always, and I do mean always, been stopped, either by the attorney or by the mayor. And I can tell you, you can go back and you can look at commission meetings. I even have commission meetings on the old CDs that I paid $1 for. That's how far back I go, and I still have them. Never, ever, ever is anyone up there to be attacked in any way. You can, disagree, you can be vehement, you can do all of these things, but no one is personally attacked, ever. And it's precedence in this city that doesn't happen. So, in case you're wondering, I'm here to tell you, I've witnessed it so many times, even with every single mayor we have had here. Never happened. Thank you.
And even if that was the case, I think we need to adhere to the letter of the law. If precedent was wrong, we need to fix that going forward.
Again, I don't think we've adopted anything, so precedent can be forgotten. So maybe it's time for us to
Yeah, I'm
maybe
saying
adopt
even if
some
that
rules.
was the case, if we're wrong in the eyes of the law, then we should follow the law and move
Just
along.
Being very cautious, that's it.
Yep. Okay, any further audience comments? Thank you. All right, next we have the consent agenda. Can I please have a motion to adopt?
Mayor, I just wanted to make, I didn't say this when we were.
Certainly.
The minutes, there was one typo, so I just wanted to say what's on the agenda. It was a date in Commissioner Resnicki's final comments at the end, so it's nothing of, action or significant. It was just a mistype of a date for the dog parade. So I made that correction, but that is not what's on the agenda. That's the only change.
Thank you.
And so on the consent agenda, what we would be making a motion to approve is consent items A and F, correct?
Correct.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent items.
Second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Philps?
Yes.
Commissioner Resnicki?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
Yes.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, City Clerk. Next, we have action items 5B, the interlocal agreement with Pinellas County.
Good evening, Jennifer McMahon. Here to present to you an interlocal agreement. Last year, we added two. We have a parking agreement that we've had for over 20, 30 years with the county where we have shared 50-50 parking revenue with that lot. Last year, to gain control over some action on the beach, we took over the Cabana Service area in which we then, in turn, for the revenue we make, which is about $102,000 a year, we maintain the bathrooms. It is up for renewal for us to do that with the parking, and so that is what is before you today. So I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jennifer. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't know if you have, I hope you have this information. You mentioned $102,000 for concession revenues that the city has received or could potentially receive, is my first question.
We get monthly payments.
Okay, and it's total
from Sand Dunes, correct? When we renewed with Sand Dunes with our own contract, because they're our Cabana Service, they pay us monthly for the county lot and Upham and Pass Grill.
Okay. And then my other question with revenues as well as expenses, do you happen to have the total revenues? Because when I read the interlocal agency agreement, it says 50-50 collection of parking fees. So outside of the concession, what is the city making?
The 50-50 split is last fiscal year, $681,097.27.
681?
Mm-hmm.
And do you know the expenses?
The expenses since we've taken over averages about $800 a month. That includes pressure cleaning, toilet paper, paper towels, things of that nature. Obviously, it'll shift when we're in season a little bit. And then this contract really outlines when what we've experienced was a sink falls off or the doors, the electrical is out, like with this last storm, and we couldn't access it, and we had to get into Duke. So these extra expenses, we had to work it out in this agreement that it wouldn't exceed $25,000, and then it would kick in the county taking over from that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Those were the questions I had.
Great. I had a couple questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How has your experience been working with the vendor?
Sand Dunes is our vendor that we've had for over 5 years to begin with. So he's been great to work with.
Okay. And I know we had some transitional challenges in the very beginning, maintenance, bathrooms, and so on. Have we gotten all those resolved?
That's what this contract is. We really outlined what we are responsible for and what the county is responsible for. Like I said, you'd had some vandalism and a sink would get torn off, and we're like, hey, we're just doing general maintenance. Do we replace the sink? So this is why we came back to the table with them and with our attorneys and their attorneys to work this out so we can clearly define what we're responsible for and what they're responsible for.
Okay. And then in your opinion, has this been an improvement to our city, or has it been, or we're better off the way we were before?
I think it's an improvement because it gives us control, and that's the whole reason why we sought after this to begin with, is to control how the cabana service that we have on our beaches.
I'm just trying to understand, like, from the feet on the ground perspective, right? Is this beneficial to us, or rather, you know, are we just spending additional time and resources that could be allocated somewhere else better?
We had some hiccups in the beginning, facility maintenance-wise, not with the cabana service. And I think this contract irons that out, and we've had direct communication, like I said, even just this past week with issues that we had with the tropical storm and what we experienced, and they were very receptive with us. So it took a couple hiccups in the first couple months, but I think we got those ironed out, and I think the contract outlines what we feel would help us and them move forward.
Thank you so much.
Add some other additional, especially with, on page 448, Article 4A, and this is maybe something for the city attorney to look at. It mentions parking fees, beach parking. I'm trying to get to it. It's hard to go in this little laptop. So on A, gross receipts less applicable state sales tax. So we pay 100% of the sales tax to the county, or is that a 50-50 like split after? It was a little confusing to me to understand what the gross revenue was on parking fees. So like when we collect all these parking fees, then the city has to pay sales tax, right? So is part of whatever the 100% sales tax, let's say, if it's, I'm gonna make it simple. If it's $50, do we pay the full $50, or do we reduce that also, the 50% from what we send to the county? You know, I don't get what the gross, you know, are we just splitting the gross and then we have more expenses? Because then it would add expenses to us, is what I'm trying to get at, that what is our total gross? So it was a little confusing for me there.
No, this is County Beach.
Which clause? I'm sorry.
It's Article 4A.
If I may, Mayor.
Please.
So holistically, and I will answer your question, Commissioner Wisnicki, but this was something that we did last year because we were having a lot of issues with the cabana service, which was controlled by the county, taking up a lot of public beach. So we saw this as an opportunity to kind of take control of the situation, which is why we have a separate agreement with the cabana services out there, right? So this is one of those things where a lot of these payment capabilities are electronic, right? So you're paying on Park Mobile, and so that's the tax portion of it. What we're doing is we're collecting the money and then distributing and making payment 50-50 to the county.
So it's after.
So it's
after.
So it's after, correct.
Okay.
Because obviously those services take a fee, right, to process payment.
maybe
So it's just
3%.
like when you pay with a credit card, the person paying is actually the one paying the 3% fee, right? You're actually getting that. So hopefully that clarifies.
So in essence, I think it's the net, you know, so you're netting out, you're subbing out the tax that's on it, that comes right from the automated process, and then what's netted is split 50-50.
Correct.
Okay, because the word is gross, that's why.
I know.
That's why I wanted
Gross
to.
versus net, I get it, yeah.
Right, so we're paying 100% of the tax.
But it says
basically,
less
and-
state sales tax.
Technically, the user
Yeah,
is paying.
It was just confusing. I didn't know what your
I understand.
quarterly report looks like because I don't have an example, so I'm not quite sure how that's deducted, you know. Like you said, you got a column for gross and then you have net. I don't know what's going to the county. I'm just trying to be fair, you know. I want to understand what our true expenses are if we're paying 100%.
Well, I think, it's not really my opinion, but I think the county could technically keep 100% because it's their property. So I think we're actually coming out pretty well by taking 50%, and all we're really doing is maintaining the bathrooms. we negotiated this last year, and I thought these edits were pretty straightforward, just because we're also getting the income from the cabana service, and we even got them to agree to up to a certain threshold on facility improvements if need be. I think it's up to 20,000. So like Jennifer said, I mean, I think very minimal upkeep for 50% of beach parking that technically the county could keep all of it if they wanted to.
Thank you. I mean, it does seem like, I mean, we have, again, I hope these are the numbers, right? $681,000 in revenue from parking is what I'm hearing, plus an additional 102 for concession, right? So 783,000 in revenue, and about 9,600 in janitorial a year, janitorial, which from what I understand from the agreement, it's a third-party janitor because it cannot be a city, correct? So, and I figure that's how you know it. But then I'm thinking, what about all the other expenses, like trash pickup on the beach? If we station police at the parking lot, is that take away from from them going elsewhere? Like, there's other things that are happening your time, Jennifer, right? Like, there's other outside expenses in managing this that I know it's hard to put a number because we're not, it's not a receipt and we're not sending back, but it has to be more, in my opinion, than $9,600 that we're spending. I'm not saying, and I hope it's not more than $700,000 that we're spending, but what I'm saying, I want to make sure that we understand truly what we're spending, and you might not have all that information.
I do.
Okay, great.
So custodial maintenance, since we took it over, is $28,640.18. The landscaping cost is $10,675, and waste connections is $3,308.
Okay.
So a
What was the
projected
800
total
a
cost
month?
for the year, including labor and overtime cost of our staff, was $42,000.
Okay.
$596.58, to be exact.
So we're getting closer to 100,000. When I'm adding up all the expenses that you just mentioned, 42, 28, 10, 3,000.
42 is total.
Is a total.
Oh, it is the total, okay.
42 is the total. That adds up to $28,640, $10,675, $3,308, 40 cents.
Okay.
Brings us to the $42,000.
Thank you.
So it's beneficial to the city.
Okay. And then just my last one, and this might just be something that needs to be corrected. I think it's an attachment. It's page 454. It's the picture of, and it's in a yellow box, but it seems like that yellow box is shifted to the north and not, it's misleading as to what exactly the property line is because it's over to the Dolphin Hotel. So just if that could be corrected.
I see what you're saying. I think that's probably just a graphics error because it's not falling on the property lines. But I do know the property lines do converge in that area.
Well, we've got two yellow borders.
The exhibit.
Thank you. That's all I'm asking.
Thank you, Commissioner. And if we may, in the meanwhile, ask Commissioner Lorenzen to please mute his recording device. Thank you, sir.
Sorry. Is that my engine you could hear?
Well, something.
We'll call it your engine.
Okay, sorry about that.
All right. Any further questions for Jennifer? Do we have any public comments? Thank you.
Can I ask one last thing? Sorry,
Sure.
it just popped in my head. Is this interlocal agency agreement the same as the prior one? Or was there changes? Because I don't have a comparison, so I'm not sure what the change was from before. Thank you.
I can speak on that. So it was not the same because remember what we did last year was actually more. Right, we already kind of had a revenue split with parking, but we took over a concession. And so I had to include with Andrew's assistance, a lot of language in there about county having no control over this, you're giving this. So there was a lot more language related to the concession in that agreement. which gave us an opportunity to develop our own agreement with the concession. So now this is more specific to the parking and the responsibilities and clarifying things. So it's not the same, it's different, but conceptually it leaves us in a very similar situation with a lot more clarity. No problem.
Thank you, Matthew. Do we have a motion?
I will move to authorize this.
Go ahead, Nick.
I'll move to authorize the city manager to execute the interlocal agreement with Pinellas County for parking and concessions enforcement and maintenance.
I'll second that.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Resnicki?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
Yes.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Philps?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, City Clerk. Next, we have action item 5C, settlement agreement. City Attorney? Matthew?
Yeah, Matthew will handle this, but this is related to the decision made at the executive session and the follow-up direction that we got from you.
Yes. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Mayor. Matthew McConnell for the record. So I just want to hit on the high level here because this is obviously part of the agenda and part of public inspection, but we did have an exhibit came in because yesterday what I did, there was a magistrate meeting and I had our magistrate, via the stipulation that we all agreed on, include an exhibit, which was the order reducing the lien to $15,000 because we have a very unique process in our code that allows for people to apply for lien reductions. But the biggest high-level things I just want to touch on real quick is this case has been going on since 2019. It's related to short-term rentals. We've gotten partial summary judgments in some of the bigger claims, which are essentially going after our short-term rental ordinance and the way we passed it and the validity and trying to go ahead and reverse everything that's happened since 2004. So the bigger items in there we've resolved, but what this does is there's a total fine owed of $33,328, which we imposed in 2022 at the magistrate hearing. The city has agreed, and they have agreed to pay us $15,000 in the next 10 days, and we will release the liens, and then they will voluntarily dismiss the case with prejudice, which means they can't bring it back because it is a declaratory action in circuit court. There's 4 plaintiffs here. And where we got to that number was obviously we have PRM, our insurance carrier, that handles a majority of this, but Andrew and our office handled over the last 6 years, and this included the 2 appeals that we spoke about too, roughly $16,000 to $17,000 over the 6-year span that we expanded, so we figured it was going to make the city whole. So the only other thing I want to just show real quick, even though it's a public record, is the exhibit I added, which was not part of the agenda. Overhead, please. Just a special magistrate order granting the lien reduction from $33,000 and some change to $15,000, which will now be part of the overall agreement that we will have for public inspection once fully executed.
Thank you, Matthew.
No problem.
Commissioners, any questions? Do we have any public comments? Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion?
I move to authorize this, the settlement agreement, David Green et al. Per July 23rd, 2024, City Commission Executive Session.
A second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
Yes.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Philps?
Yes.
Commissioner Resnicki?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Next, we have item 5D, formerly 4D, the professional engineering service contract. So I pulled this item because as I'm reading this, this is a agreement with Half Associates to do peer reviews on several different items, but in particularly traffic and transportation related issues for various proposed developments in the city of St. Pete Beach. And the reason I pulled this is because this particular engineering firm is also hired by several of the developers and applicants for variances, for conditional use applications, and for other reasons. And then we have them verifying their own work. In one instance, if our memory serves me correctly, they actually represented one of the named developments here. And then in other cases, they're working on sides of the fence. And I think in the interest of making sure that we get the best possible independent, unbiased review, we should have a firm that is not also working for the developers at the same time while they're working for the city, and then in some cases reviewing their own work. And so I would, my recommendation is that we ask the city manager to propose a alternate at this point. The reason we're having to use an independent contractor is because we're lacking the necessary staff in this position. That is one of the open positions that we are looking to fill. But in the interim, I think the city would be served better by having somebody else do this work. City manager, I don't know if you wanted to add any info.
I don't have any other information other than I think we'd have to do an RFP, so that may take some time. I would want to see I see 3 head nods.
Yep.
So,
Wait.
well, I do have a couple questions. So, so we would need to have contracts with perhaps multiple firms that do this work in order to be able to pick one that at any given time isn't involved in any projects in the city, correct? So we might need to have contracts in place with 2 or 3 different companies, you know, because we could pick a different company and then they could then, you know, have a client that's doing business in the city within a few months. And so, I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea to have somebody doing independent peer reviews who's truly independent. But I guess I don't know how many companies we have to pick from and how we can, you know, if we need to have contracts in place with multiple companies, or if we can hire one on the fly, which I'm assuming we can't. We'd have to put it out an RFP per instance, correct?
So we only need an RFP if the contract exceeds $25,000. So if we had multiple contracts with different vendors for less than $25,000, I have the authority to execute those per project. So that's another alternative we could look at to pivot a little quicker and see what's available and have smaller contracts for each particular project and make sure there's no conflict of interest between that particular vendor also doing business for the developer.
Okay.
The mayor had mentioned, sorry, Mayor, may I speak?
Sure.
The mayor had mentioned, because in the meantime, I know that it's staffing, right? So because of that, the mentioning of the staffing, does that mean that when that position is hired, is that staff able to do this kind of a study?
We have a transportation planner vacancy. I'm looking at our community development director because my public works director is not here. But could you help me answer whether that particular person has the licenses required to do traffic study review?
Good evening, Kristen Coleman, Community Development Director. As far as qualifications go, I don't know necessarily if there is licensing that is required to do the traffic study. I do have a concern that with this particular item, it was kind of centered on our upcoming developments coming in. We do have everyday things, you know, with site plan approvals and reviews and things where we look at transportation and circulation as well as parking and other issues. But I know that this was kind of dictated towards that with some upcoming proposals. But I'm sorry to deviate, but yeah. I mean, that would be, it's not a position right now that we have up on the website, so I'm not sure really what the job description and what that entails, but I could look that up for you if I can see what previously was required.
And may I, and not to put any pressure, you know, on, my point is not that I would want the position to have to do this, because from what I understood from the packet was the difficulty of the amount of work that's coming into the city, and with the staff currently being able to handle that amount of work. And that's why we needed to contract out. So regardless of whether that position is brought in or not, the amount of work is what I think we're trying to, I don't want to say alleviate, but address, right? Because it's going to be coming in. So it's not that I want it added in the job description by any means. Right. You know, I want to just know whether, is it for that position? Is that what the person's going to do, or what we should do? And I appreciate it, what Commissioner Marriott said, is to have multiple vendors, right? Because we don't know who's going to use what, and to be able to pull for someone. And maybe that is more doable even for costs, because you're only going to be using it when you need it. So we're not.
There definitely will not be a time, if we have development with traffic study requirements, that we will not need some sort of contract work. So we can definitely take your direction and try to expand our choices of vendors and make sure that whatever traffic study they're doing, we put as much distance from a potential conflict, depending on the work they're assigned to.
I mean, I think it warrants a further discussion whether we have it today or not, but in my mind, there almost should be and we've had this conversation several times now in the last year and a half, where we have, you know, this same consultant working on our comprehensive plan, and then also working for a developer, right? And we've had this conversation. I'm not trying to rehash it. I'm simply saying, and so I think one of the things that we may want to look at to alleviate this, so that this situation doesn't, you know, come up again in the future, maybe one of the things, I'm not sure how we would structure this, but you know, if you've worked on one side in the last 3 years, you are not eligible to bid on something for the city for the next 3 years. I'm just giving an example. I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but I think that's something that might warrant further discussion, not necessarily tonight, because it's just the appearance of a conflict sometimes is enough. Yes.
All these engineering contracts are going out to bid as a collective. That we currently have, and so we can set that criteria. So that is, I believe, they all expire the end of the calendar year, around that. So we've already been working on a team that's putting together criteria for what we're looking at, and if that's the direction you guys want to add to that, we absolutely, when it comes to traffic or things like that, can put that in there. And then it's a rubric that we rate each one of these firms, and that's who we end up contracting with. So we have multiple of these firms that we work with right now that we did this exact same process with, and they're all coming up within the year, not specific on the date, but if you guys want to have that discussion on what criteria you guys want us to score them, we can absolutely do that.
Okay.
So.
Maybe we add that for a future discussion so that we can think through some of the implications of that. Do we have a consensus that we would want to send this back to the city manager to give us an alternative?
Yes, makes sense.
Okay. Any public comments? Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. Next, we have item 6A, first reading of ordinance 2024-02. City Clerk.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Ordinance 2024-02, an ordinance of the City of St. Pete Beach, Florida, amending the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98, Buildings and Building Regulations, Article 3, Property Maintenance, Section 98-66, Residential and Commercial Property Maintenance, Article 4, Seawalls, Bulkheads, and Retaining Walls, Section 98-100, Standards for seawalls, bulkheads, and retaining walls not on Gulf of Mexico, Section 98-101, standards for seawalls, bulkheads, and retaining walls on the Gulf of Mexico. Section 98-104, appeals, providing for codifications, conflicts, severability, correction of scrivener's error, construction, publication, and an effective date.
Thank you, City Clerk. Brandon?
Good evening, Brandon Berry, City Planner. We could pull up the presentation. So this is a relatively short modification to the city's seawall, bulkhead, and retaining wall ordinance. It's been several years since we made any large changes to this ordinance. The one exception was a few years ago. We did increase the seawall height to be standard throughout the city. There's really 3 points with this ordinance. The first is to reintroduce seawall, bulkhead, and retaining wall variance standards and requirements. Second is to update outdated technical and construction standards. The third is to set minimum maintenance requirements for seawalls, bulkheads, and retaining walls. So the city's seawall ordinance is about 65 years old at this point. It was majorly updated in 1983, and over time these section references have expired, board responsibilities have changed, and because of that, the city's current seawall ordinance variance standards are not currently enforceable at the staff level. So one purpose of the ordinance is to reestablish the means of pursuing seawall construction or height variances. Due to the technical nature of these variances, we're recommending that the variances be reviewed by the building official through administrative review. Like any kind of administrative decision, if there's an appeal of that decision, it would either go to the city commission or to a board that you appointed to hear those appeals. We're recommending that a marine engineer need to be the one to certify the hardship in the land or structure. That would be the basis for the variance. There need to be some kind of special upland conditions that create a hardship, just like you would see with any other kind of variance, a hardship of the structure or the land. It can't just be predominantly a financial concern. The application of the subject standards, so whether that's the height or the construction standard, would need to cause some kind of peril to the property. The variance granted needs to be the minimum to mitigate that peril. So for instance, on the bay side, the city currently has a 5-foot NAVD 88 height standard. If the seawall is currently at 3 feet and the variance would be mitigated by a 4-foot seawall, the variance would be to a 4-foot seawall, to build a 4-foot seawall, not a 3, maintain it at 3. And the 5th criteria would be that the upland is reasonably modified to retain or detain the 25-year, 24-hour storm. The second is related to construction standards. Currently, the city's Code of Ordinances has very specific technical standards for construction. Over time, these construction standards have changed. Best practice currently is to rely on the design engineer, the applicant's engineer, to certify the seawall for the particular property. These are documents that we get with any seawall permit. So we're removing most of the technical standards and again, just relaying it to the seawall marine engineer that they need to certify the design of the seawall. It expands the material standards. The standards in the code that were written in 1983 really focused on aluminum and concrete seawalls. Since then, there have been more efficient standards put in place for reinforced plastics, fiberglass, and so on. It expands the range of materials that would be permitted. It doesn't change anything related to the elevation requirements. They do stay the same. They're currently 5 feet NAVD on the bay, 6 feet NAVD on the Gulf. Those would not change. And it does set specific substantial improvement requirements for when a seawall needs to be brought into compliance with the height and the construction standards. These 2 items were not in the struck-through ordinance that went out with your packet. They are just minor changes. If the commission is amenable to it, we would like to bring this back for final reading. The first is on page 477 of your packet. We had proposed striking through the concrete cap standards. We're recommending, after consultation with the building official, leaving that in. And also on packet page 478, we're recommending that corrosion-resistant steel be a requirement unless an alternative is proposed by the applicant and certified by the engineer. Corrosion is one of the major fail points for a seawall. So in consultation with the building official, we would like to add in corrosion-resistant steel as a general standard for seawalls. And finally, the city actually does not have any specific maintenance standards for seawalls, bulkheads, or retaining walls. We're recommending adding those in. The proposal would be that the seawalls, bulkheads, retaining walls need to be maintained in good repair effectively to operate the way that they are installed. Any kind of flow over the seawall to adjacent properties or the right-of-way would be evidence of disrepair. And seawalls that do not currently meet the city's construction and height standards would be in disrepair if they created flow to adjacent property or to the right-of-way. That's all I have. Our building official is present for any technical questions. I'd be happy to answer questions about the ordinance. We're asking for a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 2024-02.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Yeah, I've got.
Go ahead.
I was happy to see this on here. I've had a lot of residents bring this up to me. You know, I think if we could snap our fingers and all the seawalls were 5 feet or 6 feet, I think it would help solve a problem. But I've heard of a lot of the examples. I've seen the examples. Our waterfront lots are all different shapes and sizes. Some people's lot dips down a little bit to the water, others are flat. And, you know, I could see how having a seawall 5 feet might cause a property to flood more with that's built on a slab. So my understanding of this is, if that was the case, this ordinance provides a process to potentially allow residents to get a variance for that. But they have to hire an engineer, and it's their cost to do that.
Correct, and that's standard practice with an application in general. We always get engineering documents with the seawall. When there is grounds for a variance, when there is a hardship, it would be the marine engineer that certifies that variance.
Okay. But for example, like if someone's building a new construction home and they update their seawall, then that would have to be 5 feet or 6 feet, depending where it's located.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I understand. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have several questions on this one. And I want to make sure that to the public we're saying, or that the public hears, it's not that we're looking for a 5-foot seawall. Is an NAVD, okay, because that's a misconception. I think many people go around speaking that we're going to put up 5-foot seawalls, but that's not the case. And anybody can go to the Don Cesar neighborhood and see what a 5 nav looks like at one of the lowest lying areas in the city. But because of that, I have a couple of questions. Do you know, and you don't have to have the answer, how many administrative approvals have been done already since the 5 nav was installed?
I don't have an exact number. It's a handful. It's not a hugely significant number.
Okay. Then with that, and I've seen a letter and what it looks like when someone was given this approval, which I believe was not authorized, but was given this approval. With these changes, for the handful that have been approved, how is that corrected? So, and you might not have the answer. So this is just a question, how do we go back? And specifically I ask this because I reside and represent a district that's had significant issues with flooding. And when the 5 nav came to fruition, we were kind of excited to see what this would finally look like in the city. And like I said, you can go over there and see what the outfalls look like, and that's what a 5 nav looks like. But I know at least 2, and I might say 3, but I know 2 for sure, and I can give you the address off my head, of homes that were approved with an administrative approval. So yet we have outfalls on the same street that are at 5 nav, yet the immediate neighbor did not go to the 5 nav. So question being, how did the city do a 5 nav and not the resident do the 5 nav? And they abut each other. So that's one, and how can it be corrected? I think from what I remember back when that was happening, there was an issue on backfill, and maybe a building official could help with this, because I'm not sure if this is being addressed in this ordinance or what the procedure, or are we just saying an engineer will be able to discuss, with the building official on approval and allow backfill, because I think there's not an ordinance in our city for backfill. Is that correct? And I'm trying to remember back in the day when this was a hot topic.
Good evening. Luke Curtis, building official. So to first comment on the backfill, our ordinance does allow for backfill or fill to accommodate for landscaping. It does prohibit fill for structural. So if somebody's building a new home and they want to elevate everything and they're setting the structure on that, that's prohibited. In regards to the other comment, as far as what was previously approved, the intention is not to go back and make them demolish the seawall that was previously approved through a process that has been corrected, but yeah, the intention is not to go back to those. Don't quote me on this. I believe there was maybe 5 that were approved for a lower elevation. It was 5 or 6. But yeah, the intention is not to go back to those properties and force them to elevate that.
Now, from what I remember from the letter I read on those permits was that they, when asked, are to go to the 5 nav. And I don't have a copy of that letter with me to show, but what does that mean? You know, because they capped their seawalls. They didn't make, well, in one particular home that I can think of, they did make a seawall, but the structure was supposed to be able to be sufficient enough to add whatever is needed, right, to make it a 5 nav. So it's not knocked down, the whole seawall, but to continue going up. Just question mark. There's a big project we want to do in the neighborhood, so again, if it's going to be, what we're trying to avoid is the up and down, there's a name for it, like teeth, you know. Gap tooth, thank you. Right, that there's not a gap tooth, you know, effect. I'm an owner who has an issue with this because water comes over these seawalls, and if anybody's down there, you'll see this it's like a white water river of water flowing down the street because it's going through that gap in somebody else's seawall. So that to me means that that property is intruding in a neighbor's property, causing damage, right, because of that gap. So can that be corrected? I mean, it's a handful, right? It's not that many. So I'm trying to address something that's pretty big in this neighborhood.
So if you're referring to the ones that were approved for a lower elevation as opposed to what's being approved now, there's also on that same line, there's also older seawalls that are existing that are going to be a lower elevation. The code does attest to maintenance. So if a seawall gets to a point where it is so degraded where it's allowing water to basically pass through the seawall, then there's, I think the maintenance portion of the ordinance does attest to that and has some criteria there. I can't remember exactly what it is, but throughout the city we're going to have different elevations, whether it's from something previously approved or just aging seawalls that were done at different elevations. But ultimately, with the ordinance and with the elevation change that was done previously, setting the elevation to 5 feet NAVD, that ultimately is where we want to be because it's a higher standard. It's going to overall protect the city from potential inundation.
Right. And how about living shorelines? Is that addressed in this seawall ordinance too? Because, I mean, the city itself, we've approved quite a couple up here already on living shorelines. And I know the Don Cesar neighborhood has a grant that they're coming to design, hopefully by October, which is a living shoreline. Does that need to be addressed, or does this address it because it's an engineering plan, or drawing that's being submitted to the city?
So Brandon can correct me if I'm mistaken, but there are no set criteria for a living shoreline. I believe it mentions, refers to a living shoreline, but in the effect that it's designed, the ordinance does not prevent a living shoreline from being done. So it would basically come down to a marine engineer designing it, and then we would go through the process of an approval, just like any other application.
And it's just a discussion I do want to have with the commission, just so you know, for the particular 3 properties that are going through this grant process, and I met with the engineers last year, they are designing it to a 5 nav, a living shoreline to a 5 nav. But I know in the city we have living shorelines that are not designed to a 5 nav nor meet any particular standards. So should we, you know, can any resident just make a living shoreline? Well, how's that defined? You know, because some people think it's just riprap. You just toss them. You've seen this come through, I think this week, right? Special magistrate, or last week, or somebody that just kind of tossed their bricks out into the water, and I mean, literally did. And I remember code enforcement had to go out, and I watched it on special magistrate to make sure that they removed all the bricks that they had tossed out in the water. So, you know, how do we prevent this kind of stuff from happening?
So
You don't have to have the answer, but I'm just trying to have the discussion. Okay.
I think if I'm understanding where you're going with this, and I do share your concerns, because there seems to be a perception that we've granted quite a few variances, which then, you know, there's a reason we changed the ordinance, you know, for the purpose of resiliency, and if we're then continuously issuing variances, you know, then you end up having with that, having that effect where you have a lower seawall. My reading of this is that shores up some of the, let's not call them loopholes, but, you know, so it makes it a more stringent process for getting a variance.
That was the intent, and you're correct, living shorelines aren't necessarily mentioned in here. We do have one reference to the maintenance standards. They need to be maintained the same as the seawall. If you like, we could add that language to the NAVD standard. It'd be a 5 and a 6. We could add that in for the next reading.
And again, I met with these engineers. I think Clemens was the name. I don't know if that sounds familiar. They're out of Tampa. And it's doable. They probably would have to have variances. And to me, if they can do this in the Donzasar neighborhood, that's pretty low, then I think it's doable. But then understand, to Commissioner Phil's comment about different properties, and, you know, where a home could be located in one property is different from the other. In this particular neighborhood, we have right-of-way and street, so it's completely different. So you do have to look at things individually. It being a handful of variances that I'm hearing that is what we need. And I believe we could change this at any time, but we have to talk about who's going to be looking at this. And I watch Board of Adjustment meetings, and I see quite a few. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is. Maybe Matthew could tell me, but what is the percent of go-aheads, you know, yeses, when, again, the seriousness of resiliency and the flooding that's happening is so important that and not just because I'm the commissioner, but I would like to know what's happening. Should this be a commission decision on review, if it's just a handful? We meet more than the boards. I don't know the length of time that it would take, and that's just, you know, again, something to discuss. If it becomes too much or if it's too little, then it would never come to us, I guess, but I would like to see what's happening with this in particular.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Kristen Coleman, Community Development Director. So with this, it wouldn't necessarily go before the Board of Adjustment. This would be done administrative relief. We do have 3 different variances, so it gets a little hairy in there. But this would actually go to our building official for his review. So with the previous ordinance that we had, there was no clear procedure. And I think that's our housekeeping issue, is if we're going to grant or review variance relief, who does it go to? What are the criteria? Are there fees associated with it? So while we were in there, we wanted to take a look at some housekeeping issues, kind of update it, spruce it up, amending the materials and everything like that. So I just wanted to make clarification. It does not go before the Board of Adjustment. It would stay in-house administratively and through our building official for review.
And at any time, because I think in Brendan's presentation, he mentioned that, I guess your question to us was, whether it goes to the Board of Adjustment or to the Commission, it be our decision which way we want to go. That there is administrative approvals, but maybe there's at one point you need further approval. I'm not quite sure why that was mentioned.
Or an appeal.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but by default, any appeal of a staff decision is to the city commission. You're welcome to
Okay.
designate a board, board of adjustment or another board, if you felt it was appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments?
I've got,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I've got a couple of quick questions. So on the section about maintaining the seawalls, I think the wording is that allows tidal waters to flow unimpeded over or through the barrier wall to adjacent properties or the public right-of-way. And so is the definition of that like normal tidal waters? I mean, like at what point, and I guess what I'm getting at is like Commissioner Reznicki said, you know, if there are people who were maybe they very recently built a seawall, but if the tidal waters are regularly going over the top of it, does that then violate the maintenance section of this ordinance, or is that not how this would be interpreted?
I don't think there's a time frame as it's currently written, but I think the intent with this was to avoid deflection to other properties. So if a seawall is degraded to the point where it's now causing issues to neighboring properties or to the city's right-of-way, that's when it would be considered substantially degraded. But in terms of a time frame, whether it's consistent or under a certain storm event, that wasn't specified. So it would be any event in that case.
Okay, that's a tricky one to define, right? Because I feel like this will potentially lead to, you know, anybody who has a neighbor with a you know, anyone in the Don Cesar neighborhood that has a low seawall, their neighbors can report them to code enforcement every time it's high tide, right? You know, and that's fine if that's what we're intending. I'm just, you know, I just kind of wanted to be clear on what the maintenance section, you know, that part of the maintenance section, what we were really trying to get at there.
We could always specify an event. This was taken pretty much wholesale from another city that enforces it this way, and I think the intent really was to, you know, for a seawall that is not compliant with the city's current code, that is causing significant adverse issues to adjacent properties, just to make sure that they come into compliance. That would really, under this ordinance, be the one significant trigger for compliance. That doesn't relate to optional or, you know, elective redevelopment of the seawall. So
okay.
Just to follow through with Commissioner Mary's comment is, I mean, it's such a big issue, okay? The living shoreline thing really drives me crazy. And I'll talk later about my drive around town after this last flood, but I'll use your district, for example, which I did drive around after I was able to get my car. There is a lot of outfalls, and now I'm talking about city property, right, that I know that have been what we love to call, because it sounds pretty, like living shorelines. I'm all about the environment. I want that living shoreline is part of my property, right? So this is something I want, but I want it to be done right. When I go down Boca Ciega and many of the other areas, Paso Grill Way, well, sorry, I won't take Paso Grill. Paso Grill is different. They have a seawall. But Boca Ciega specifically, I see it every time in the car line. I'm watching it. That opening is much lower than the two homes on opposite side of that area. And we call it a park. At least that's what I've been told. Actually, it does have a park name. But even before a storm surge or when you're on a king tide, the water is starting to come through. And then when we have the type of storm that we had, to see the reason why most of the homes got flooded, because they came through these lower lying, what we call living shorelines, but to me it's just a bunch of riprap that's been tossed out, you know, into the water. It needs to be addressed, you know, because the amount of water that flowed into Boca Ciega, and I'm sure the city manager could attest to this, is because it starts there, you know, and once it fills, okay, and that's what I watch even by my home, is these lower lying, supposedly living shorelines that allow the water to come through. So I just want that addressed because it's a big problem, okay? There is no maintenance, there's no requirement. it can be on a king tide. And to me, a king tide is not a storm. That's an event that is part of not only where we live, it's just, that's science. King tides exist. They're spring tides. You know, the moon, the earth, and the sun align, period. It happens, okay? So we got to make sure that we're protecting property and the neighbors, because it might not be your immediate neighbor. Like I said, I see the water rush down. I have video, and I know you all have seen it. I've sent it many, many times, rushing down the street, coming from those lowest points. So somehow it has to be addressed, and then I don't know if it triggers what you're mentioning about maintenance, because I don't want to build a seawall if that water's coming from behind my seawall. You mentioned, you know, the standard is to have things that are not corrosive, or the material, and I'm glad to hear that. But if you come by our neighborhood, you'll see all the rebars and all the tiebacks, and they're in pieces, okay? And it's all because of the water flowing down the street and coming back on these seawalls, which I know has to be happening in the homes. It's not just because of the right-of-way. It's not just because of the Ansasar. Anybody, including Boca Ciega, I think also has some of these parks where water comes in and goes in behind the neighboring's home. If they have metal tiebacks, they might not have it anymore and just not know it yet. So I just wanted to address, because that is a big problem in the city overall, so. Thank you.
Right. Any further comments or questions?
I was just going to say, sort of on this topic, I've shared the information with our city manager recently. The Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, which I'm part of and was at the meeting yesterday, they've offered to come and do a presentation just for some information around this area, not seawalls in particular, but I'd like to follow up on that and see, maybe get them out for one of our commission meetings in the future.
I think it'll be September. I'll get them scheduled.
Okay. Cool. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any audience comments? Thank you. Do we have a motion?
And I just have a question about motioning. So when we motion based off of our discussion, is this stuff that we kind of address after, or this is not something that has to be in this ordinance? Like the living shoreline, I know that you said there's something you work on. Is that's something that's just brought back? Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, motions, like you don't really need a motion for a first read on a majority of the time. It's a formality. Okay. And no, I would not recommend you just say you're approving the first reading. That's it.
As a motion.
Mm-hmm, correct.
I'll motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 2024-02.
Second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Filtz?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosnicki?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. All right, next we have items for discussion. 7A, review of the city clerk's updated job description.
Hi, yes, thank you, Mayor. I updated the job description as directed at the last city commission meeting. I removed city manager as discussed. I took a review with my staff to understand what was obsolete, maybe something that needed to be expanded upon. A few things to mention are when we do the financial forms, it used to be they would come to my office and we would either assist with filing with Pinellas County, or you would do it on your own and give us a receipt. Well, now that's done electronically, so that's been modified in my job description. I do serve on I don't serve on, but I lead and assist with the Employee Recognition Committee and provide staff support. That is something that's new as well since I've started. I do maintain the lobbyist registrations, provide information, logs, all of that for you all, and that is also new since I've started with the city. So those are a few things that I wanted to note that were not in the prior job description that are relevant and related to my everyday duties.
Thank you. Comments, questions?
I just one comment. I just want to appreciate that you did this, because I know it was something that you had brought up, and making sure that it matched what you're doing currently. So I appreciate you doing this for us.
Thank you. Okay, next we have discussion item 7B, and I can't read my own handwriting, so Commissioner Fields, you're up.
Yep, it's the house on 73rd and Mangrove, right here around the corner. We all know it. It's entrance to the city. I know it's been brought up multiple times since I've been on the commission. I've had a couple residents reach out to me about it more recently, in which I reached out to our city attorney's office, and Matt provided me with a good update on it, and I just wanted him to share it with everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner. Matthew McConnell. So this house has been in and out of code enforcement for probably 5 years. As recently as this year again, there is currently fines running on the property of $250 a day that are probably somewhere near 180, 190,000 at this point and counting. So there is a provision in our code, which I've discussed with the city manager and Andrew and code enforcement, that we are going to, it's kind of the next step here, which is deeming the property a chronic nuisance, which is a step above the code enforcement process. It's still through the magistrate, but there are certain steps we have to take, which we will embark on, and then hopefully the end result would be getting authority from the magistrate to abate the property ourselves, at least the outside. I do believe the individual is blind, if I remember, and I think that he just needs help and doesn't know where to start. So I think I understand the complaints from everyone, but I'm really trying to do what's right here. I believe he's a veteran, so we may contact Veteran Affairs too, just to see if there's anything they can do. But we are going that next step of the chronic nuisance to try to get more leverage for the city to be able to assist on its own in a situation where he can't. So that's, we're anticipating September, if not October, because there's a 30-day, 14-day kind of response time once we embark this chronic nuisance process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Any further comments or discussion on this item? Next, we have item 7C. Commissioner Reznicki, a discussion on process.
Thank you. And I don't know if to call it process, but this is, coming to whether sitting on the commission or outside, and I've spoken with the city manager too about this a little bit, contract management, ordinances that have been approved, like the Seawall, and we just talked about that. CUPs have been approved, and I'm not just talking about the large resort developments, I'm talking about smaller CUPs that have been approved throughout the city. And I'm talking about, are they compliant? How is it being managed? How do we know that things that have been approved, whether at the commission or anywhere else, that there's follow through? I've personally, and I've brought up a couple of them to the city, seen some approved CUPs, and I know one in particular that's going to be expiring, but I just saw go to special magistrate, right? So to me, it's a little confusing that the commission approves something and now it's out of compliance, and maybe there's specific wordings in there that allows it or whatnot, but that the commission isn't brought to the commission's attention. And that's one. I'm sure there's many. I don't know how to address something like that. I don't know contracts that are expiring, that are not compliant, or even, we consent to approve vehicle agreements, but I don't know what's our standard of removing vehicles or not, or what's the maintenance of vehicles. I watched a couple drive through saltwater. Are all of them aluminum? I read what the one we just approved tonight has been built of, but when I see very expensive fire trucks or public works trucks plowing through flooded streets, we all know that if you do that, you better go get your chassis washed quick, right? You're probably going to have problems, and they're expensive, you know. I'm not able to buy a $76,000 truck, but I have to deal with my truck that's been flooded, right? So you know, I'm just trying to be cautious because of our spending. Motions that have been made, I know I brought this up a while ago about the motion for the seawalls in the neighborhood of the Don Cesar that was made last year, and I forgot the specific date. I think it was sometime in June of last year, but nothing has happened, right? But that was a motion drawn by the commission, and you know, we have changes on the dais, so it falls through, you know. So anybody else coming up here, how are they going to know, you know, do we receive status reports? And again, I guess it is process, right? Like, what would be an efficient way for the commission to get a status on an ordinance that was approved? Is it good? Is it not? Is it working? Does it need to be readdressed? Or a CUP that was approved by the commission or whomever, and they're non-compliant, you know, does it come back? And I just wanted to talk that with you all, because I've been kind of frustrated about seeing this happen, driving up and down Gulf Boulevard, and I'm like, okay, I know that was a CUP approval. I know we said X, Y, and Z is supposed to be done, but who physically actually goes out there? I don't think it's me, right? I don't want it to be me. I know what we said and what we approved, but I don't quite understand that whole thing. So anyways, just wanted to bring it out there to you all.
I think part of it, a little bit, can be on us, you know, to ask city staff and ask them to bring it up at a commission meeting. I mean, it's not easy to do that for everything, of course. We can't, but I think that's part of it, just as far as our side.
And what's hard too, Commissioner, is that I know the ones that we approve, right? We're sitting here, and I do my deja vus of like, wait a minute, I remember sitting out there in the audience and everybody here approves something, but I'm not going to remember all the detail, right? And sometimes I'll call an commissioner and say, hey, do you remember when you approved this and what was said? And then I try to scurry, even for the motion, I knew it was done last year. I was sitting in the audience when it happened, but I couldn't remember the date. You know, like I'm not, I remember June, whatever the date was. I know, so I have to literally go on my computer and search and look through each and every one. And sometimes it's in a update, or like what we're doing right now, it's not on the agenda, right? So it's not that easy to find. So yeah, I'm going through a lot of time trying to figure out a status of something. So I'm just trying to establish some type of process. You know, we don't have, at least I don't know if we have a contract management system, or like, is there somewhere I can go, like, hey, this person's responsible for this, so you can call so-and-so, or, you know, I don't want to call Pete Dewar and say, hey, this is a code enforcement, because then technically I'm not sure. Is it a code enforcement issue? Because it was approved by the commission. You know, I'm a little confused on that process. So anyways, thank you. And maybe, you know.
May I?
Yes.
Speak? So in the most simplest terms, at the end of the day, I'm accountable for all that you're asking for. And my expectation would be that if you want information, that you're coming through the city manager's office, and then I'm putting in the process and reporting and technology to be able to get that back to the commission. I will say we are actively in the process right now of building tracking mechanisms. The city clerk and I have just instituted a brand new one that we are working on. And that is something we could certainly try to see if there's an accountability follow-up within that system. But a lot of the different things you're talking about are truly operational and will fall within departments. You know, CUPs fall within community development. They're responsible for making sure that they're followed and implemented. And as part of an extension of the community and me, when you see things that don't look right, reporting back to me is helpful. But we have multiple tracking systems. It's just at some point knowing what you want to know, and then I can be able to come up with a reporting system. I will say I've been actively working in the last 30 days with our public information officer, and you all will receive your first weekly operational report this Friday, and the plan is that you will get those every Friday. So that's sort of a detailed insight and look into what's happening inside in City Hall and the extension of what the departments are actually doing. And I think that'll start to help jog your memory on some of those things. But yes, my expectation would be if you do have concerns or you want reports, filter them through me, and I can certainly address that process back to the commission in some form or fashion, whether it be a report I just share with the commission, the weekly reports, including that information, or bringing it as a public item to present as a follow-up.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? I think just to your point, with the CUPs, for example, it's an approval. That doesn't mean they necessarily have to follow through, and we've had several instances with the Miramar, with Quarry Landing, where they didn't necessarily follow through, or they want to amend it in some way. There's a time frame, that's stipulated that they either have to start or they have to do something in that time frame. As far as, how do we, some of the CUPs we've seen have 20, 30, 40 conditions. Some of those, as the city manager mentioned, the staff will be keeping an eye on, and other ones are just like code enforcement issues where we have see, click, fix, right? You see it, click it, and we try to fix it, right? So, that's something that, the public can take advantage of as well. If you're seeing code enforcement issues, we have a means where you can report those. Same with, potholes or any of the other issues that we have around the city. If you see a potential violation somewhere else, bring it to our attention so that we can take a look at it, see if it warrants further action. Right? So we do, in some ways, often rely on the public as well to help us out with those, because we do have X number of staff, and they're not at every property on every street all the time. So, all right, last we have reports. City Clerk.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to remind everyone, voting is next Tuesday, 7 a to 7 p. District 2 is on the ballot, among other things, only for District 2, obviously, and that is voting at the community center. And then Districts 3 and 4, if it is applicable, their voting is open at Warren Webster. Obviously, District 2 Commissioner will not be on that ballot. I did have someone come and ask me why it wasn't showing up on their ballot, so just want to make you aware that District 2 is only for District 2. On the next agenda, we will have the Vice Mayor selection. We will review your board appointments and committee appointments for the different boards. I did send that out to all of you for review. As an FYI, I am sending it to the other District 2 commission candidate, thank you. Tired. Candidate, just so that she is aware in case and prepared too, so that we can follow through with that, not push it to another agenda. I want to make sure that everyone is prepared and reviews their stuff, as well as the outside boards like the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, the Florida League of Cities, that will also be on the agenda for your review.
Thank you.
I think that's all I have. Oh no, one more thing. I will be bringing back the map for the voting districts as we discussed. I had the GIS work on with the SOE on identifying the boundaries, as well as the Don Cesar neighborhood split between 3 and 4. So that's all I have.
Thank you, City Clerk. City Manager.
Few quick reports. Thank you. I just want to let the public know that in preparation for city staff to do an after-action storm meeting, which is where we get together and talk about what went well, what could we have done better in preparation for the next storm. In the e-newsletter, there will be a quick survey opportunity for residents to share with us from their perspective what went well and what we could do better. So it'll just be a quick one-question survey. Tell us what your experience was and what your observations were, and we're hoping to use the community feedback as well in that meeting. Also wanted to remind you all that we are looking into the bringing you back an overview of the small business grant program in September, and we'll be seeking direction from you on how to proceed with either moving forward with that program or not. And then also wanted to let you know that I am wrapping up my due diligence on the concerns over the $6 million related to the Gulf Boulevard undergrounding project. And so far, I have been able to secure that we are not missing any money. So I just want to go on record and say that. We do have 3 phases to this project. Phase 1 is complete. Phase 2A is almost complete and fully funded. And Phase 2B is part of the project that we believe to be over budget from what we anticipated or estimated at the beginning several years ago when this project started. This is pretty typical of construction projects, so in my overview, I'll be speaking with you all about what the costs exactly were in each of those phases and how we are going to land. I also our finance department has been in contact with the grantee of this project, and we are in the process of securing still $3.4 million in reimbursements for work that has been completed, but that we were behind on invoicing because of low staffing in finance, but we're going to get reimbursed, so go on the record for that. And then we also still have $3.5 million available in grant funding, so we'll be able to overlay that for you and see what that's going to do for the funding on the project. So you can expect, I do believe what you'll see in the future is if I see a very large project running through the city that for some reason needs an update because of funding, that is something that's pretty standard, and you'll see me bringing those forward as we work through these projects, especially multi-million-dollar construction projects. They're pretty complicated. So I just wanted to give you some overview and a little bit of information and sneak peek to the presentation in September. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney?
Yes, thank you. 2 things. One, just to kind of close the loop on the discussion at the beginning of the meeting regarding just public comments. In your charter itself, it says that you will adopt rules and procedures for the meetings, and in fact, thankfully, the clerk was able to provide to me Resolution 22-13, which really articulates, the rules that you've adopted for the meetings, and maybe we should recirculate that to everybody so that we have them. Mary, you're absolutely right. The things should be directed to you as the chair of this running the meeting, and not. But I think we really need to look at that. One of the constraints, obviously, if you want to think of it that way, there's Florida statutes, there's the Florida Constitution, there's the U.S. Constitution that describes what people are allowed to say and not say, and it talks about forums and things of that nature. But I think, I'm glad to see that, and I should have recalled this, that we did adopt a resolution. Thankfully, the clerk was a big part of initiating that because we needed those, but maybe we should recirculate that so that we can refresh our memories. And if something needs to be adapted or evolved, these are all learning moments, actually. And if something needs to be changed, and if we can change it within the boundaries of what the law allows, then we should do that. The other item was really just a sticky issue that every local government in Florida, probably the United States, is dealing with, is social media, okay? From the perspective of an attorney, social media makes me think about public records, sunshine law violations, any active litigation, any upcoming quasi-judicial thing. So I don't believe that we've adopted anything dealing with social media. It's a reality. Every local government is dealing with it and how to deal with it. And I would just, in the same vein that a resolution was adopted for your rules of procedure, which are really good and accurate, it might not hurt to open up that discussion at some point about just social media, just because I do have those 3 areas of concern that I have with regard to public records, and when someone would ask for like your posts and those posts have come down, or for example, what if you post on, let's say, Nextdoor or whatever, and then you've got another commissioner, and this applies to your boards as well, are on that same platform, and they exchange, and there could inadvertently be some discussion about an item that's coming before the board. So those are the types of things that I worry about as a lawyer, and I think are worthy of a discussion at some point when you're prepared to do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Lorenzen?
Yeah, well, greetings, and sorry you can only see half my head. Maybe that's a good thing, but it sunset about 45 minutes ago here in Newfoundland. But anyway, I've got some thoughts. Just wanted to share since this is my last meeting, and so grab some popcorn and a bottle of water, whatever you got. And I apologize, I'm going to have to read some of this. So I volunteered back in December because I was, quite frankly, shocked that it appeared that nobody else was going to come forward from D4 for me to pass the girl of Ina Del Mar. Luckily, that was not the case. And I hope that my 33 years of military and some other background helped out with leadership skills and background in the federal government, although I will say that I was clearly a neophyte when it came to local politics. Nevertheless, I answered the call to service, as I've always done in my life. I've actually enjoyed the challenge of serving as a commissioner. The most fulfilling part was clearly getting to help residents and neighbors fix local problems, from garbage alleyway pickups to potholes, playground equipment, to, hey, how do we get more shale in our alleyway, and all the way to flooding issues related to failed tidal flow valves. The variety of 24/7 calls, emails, and texts were never ending, and I found it energizing and a lot of fun to take care of most of the time, right? Now, there's another side of being a commissioner that I'll be candid is not so pleasant, and that's having to ignore the outright lies and disinformation on social media about me and to a greater extent some of my fellow commissioners. My favorite one is how some of us were being paid under the table by big developers, or that we don't listen to the voice of residents. Well, I did, and just because Group XYZ is well organized, extremely adept at social media, or leveraging fundraising efforts does not mean that group or any group represents the majority of residents. Please know I personally spent at least 50 hours on 2 major issues, studying, analyzing, reanalyzing, and heck, I even did a lot of prayer on some of those issues because it was that important to me. I've also been saddened by some of the dishonest flyers sent out that were already addressed. Things like hand-selected candidates or puppet council of big developers claiming $6 million had vanished. It all comes across like Soviet-style propaganda, and I thought it was just a bunch of misleading drivel. And quite frankly, whoever crafted those should be ashamed of themselves for putting that kind of garbage out. Okay, so back to a more positive and happy perspective. I found my fellow commissioners to be dedicated, hardworking, and honest people just trying to do their best in a demanding role that often pulls each away extensively from family and your jobs. This is not a minimal part-time gig. Mayor, I applaud you for running our meetings with patience and displaying a calm demeanor at all times. I know that wasn't easy. There were times where some disagreed with others on very serious issues, and things got a little heated, but that is part of the process. What matters most is at the end of the day, we all respect each other and not harbor grudges. Commissioner Marriott, I compliment you on your thoughtful way of articulating disagreements and your well-crafted thoughts. You're a role model for tactfulness, a trait I was never able to master coming from the military. Joe Mulholland, if you're sitting out there, you'll be taking my seat in just 7 days. I trust you will rely on your military and commercial background, as I hope I did, to leverage those years of experience, letting wisdom and thorough analysis to govern your votes as you step forward to represent District 4 and all St. Pete Beach residents. Good luck to all of you, and Joe, thanks for being a patriot and a future leader. I appreciate working with you, and I have to mention the city staff. You're just amazing, each and every one of you I worked with. Thank you for your time and patience, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Reznicki?
Thank you. I just wanted to be able to express, how I felt really deeply for the people who lost a lot, because even though this was not, it was a hurricane, by the way, it was Category 1 outside the Gulf and it didn't come through, but I do know there were several homes that did flood, and I'm not talking about their landscaping, that actually got water inside their house. Boca Ciega was one of them in my district, at least, that I know about. People lost roofs. We did have some pretty strong gust of winds. If some of you have seen some of the houses that now have tarp on top of their homes. You know, things like landscaping damage might not seem like a lot, but for someone who might have spent $20,000 on landscaping is a lot. Debris on the streets, beach erosion, and just city infrastructure. If you walk around and see some, you know, I went through Paso Grill, saw some of the sidewalks, and I wonder how much damage that we can't truly see yet, because water does a lot, and sometimes it's not visible. And I appreciate the city manager mentioning for the residents out there to please report it. And I'm glad that they were going to have some venue how they can send the information. I know Pinellas County had put out a survey, and I think this ties back with FEMA, because they want to know the areas or how much damage there was. You don't have to have a total loss to have some type of loss, and the information is important for the city and for the county as well as the state to know what these type of impacts are. So please, I've filled out mine. I hope a lot of people are doing the same. Even though you might not have had to put a claim, it's worth putting down the damage. I did drive around Monday. I wasn't able to get out of my house till about 6:30 p.m. Monday, because there was still water close to my knees in front of my house. So once the water in, and a shout out to St. Pete Beach Fire Department for coming out and moving water out in the outfalls. They helped clean some of the area so that the water could flow. And therefore I was able to walk out and get the car. But I did get in my car and I did drive the whole city and then focused a lot on District 2. So I did go through Bella Vista, and to my surprise, thinking that the Don Cesar was the lowest and probably the last one to be flooded, saw that 44th Street was underwater significantly, and that was around 6:30 p.m. And I did come back an hour later to see the water has subsided, but that was because low tide was at 8:20 p.m., and that gave enough pressure to just let that water go out. So I went through Boca Ciega, Lido, saw a couple of cars, of course, standing. I don't know why residents don't listen to not drive through water, but a lot of cars were towed because there was no way to turn them on. I know Boca Ciega, I talked to a couple of residents that were outside cleaning debris, and the homes on the west end of Boca Ciega were flooded. There's a few one-story homes, but even if you're on stilts and you have a garage, there's stuff downstairs, and I know the feeling. I'm on a stilt home. There's still a lot of work to get everything out. So I do feel for everybody, but I do want to thank the community because people helped. Neighbors helped before the storm, reached out to people who might not be physically able to do stuff, and they went out and helped them prepare for the storm. People that during the storm, I know, was texting and calling people, how are you doing, how much water is there? That is a relief for a neighbor to know there's someone out there, right? Because it is kind of scary. I grew up in Florida. I've been through every major hurricane. Amazingly enough, everywhere I moved, there's been a major hurricane. Andrew was my first one in Miami. And that connection is very important. So I appreciate everybody who helped in the before, the during, and the after. People are still cleaning. Again, I appreciate that. Tomorrow there is a Don Cesar Property Owners Corporation meeting at 6 o'clock at the Don Vista, so I just wanted to remind the residents out there I will be there as well. October 26th is the pep parade at Lazarillo Park. It starts at 10 o'clock. You could arrive at 9. It goes to 12. It's open to the city. It's not just for the Don Cesar neighborhood. There are a lot of prizes, so put it on your calendar. It's fun. You'd be amazed of the hundreds, and I'm not kidding, hundreds of dressed up pets walking through the park. So something enjoyable for the residents, so feel free to come and attend. Thank you.
Thank you. District 2.
Yeah. Yeah, regarding the storm, I spent time Sunday and Monday driving around, checking on some people's houses who weren't in town. It's certainly scary, especially for, a tropical, I think it was a tropical storm when it passed us. I'm guilty of it too, and I just encourage our residents to be prepared when storms come. Don't underestimate them. I know a tendency for a lot of us who have lived here for a while is to want to stay, but if there's an evacuation, I encourage people to evacuate and to be prepared. Like the city clerk said, a reminder to all residents who haven't voted yet to get out and vote on Tuesday. And then as far as an update, my district per se, but tomorrow at noon, the Seaside Seabird Sanctuary will be doing a presentation at the library, and we'll be bringing some unique birds. Pretty cool event going on tomorrow. So I just want to say, I appreciate all the residents who have reached out to me past several months to share their thoughts, share their opinions, and meet with me. And I encourage people to continue to do that. My information's on the city's website, as I always say. And thank you.
Thank you. District 1?
Sure. So District 1 fared, I think, probably better than anybody else in the storm. I think we're the high spot, although there was still significant rain, street flooding from rain. If you're one of the many people that called and texted me with pictures of your storm drains not draining, I have all those, and we will be addressing them, and we're working on getting those things addressed. And then mostly, a month in to having Fran with us, I wanted to say how much I really appreciate her being here, and I think that a lot of the issues that we've all been talking about over the last few months, I know that for me and for a lot of other people, we feel like there's a solid path forward now. And so I really appreciate that, and I know that there's a number of people in District 1 that really appreciate her timely responsiveness to concerns and problems that have cropped up. And if you haven't checked out the website lately, it's gotten a little bit of a facelift, and it's much easier to navigate. So I encourage you to look at that if you haven't. And that's all I got.
Thank you. So I wanted first to to commend our city staff and our emergency workers. I mean, both the city and the county, and I think I saw guys working on electrical poles at midnight in the middle of 30, 40 mile an hour gusts and driving wind and rain, and they're out there working. So I do want to commend the staff for the work that they've done. There's always room for improvement, and I appreciate that. And I think just looking from where we were even 2 years ago, the response from our staff is significantly improved. On the same line, I want to commend the city manager for many of the initiatives that we didn't even think necessarily that we needed that are happening. So, for example, just having the operational report on a weekly basis, just knowing kind of where we are, what's happening. The newsletter, if you're not receiving the newsletter, make sure you go to the city website, click on the newsletter link, and sign up for that. I think we have about 2,000 people right now signed up for it. I think we need more people. The more people we can get signed up, the more information we can get out to you as we have these different events, whether it's a storm event, whether it's a city event that's more fun, whether it's a special meeting that's happening. So I want to commend the city manager and as well as the Public Information Office for taking a huge step forward in those areas, and also particularly reaching out to the public and going to the meetings like in your neighborhood on a regular basis, so that one of the most challenging and frustrating things oftentimes sitting on this side is hearing you coming with the same issues over and over again and feeling like we're not doing anything. Flooding and storms being one of those. And so I'm extremely happy and relieved to see that we're making, if nothing else, we're putting a plan in place that we can then share with the community and then incrementally implement that. So I very much appreciate that. I will be in Hollywood, Florida for the rest of this week at the Florida League of Cities. Last year was my first time there, and sometimes you say, well, what did we go there for? But one of the things that I took back last year was the ability to see how other cities deal with some of the same similar issues that we have. We have 440 roughly municipalities in the state of Florida. Many of them, like us, are on barrier islands or on beach properties, and so it's a great opportunity to see how other cities are dealing with it, how other mayors and city managers and city attorneys and commissioners are dealing with the challenges that we all face You know, and so I'm looking forward to being here this week and hopefully be able to bring some additional resources back. With that, thank you everyone for coming, and we are adjourned.